Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I am here with the winner from the Las Vegas Open, Brandon Grant.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
And we will be having a discussion about his win at the Las Vegas Open and then also talking about the state of competitive Warhammer 40k as it is right now. So I hope you all enjoy it. So first off, thanks for coming on to the channel, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Big fan of the show, so it's kind of an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad that you actually watched the show. Yeah, it makes me happy because you're one of my favorite top players. I've actually been following you for a while, so it's really
Oh,
nice to hear that from you.
well, thanks a lot.
Okay, and then also just to state because people are probably going to say something. My camera is from like the year 2000, so that's why it's all grainy and
Oh,
stuff. So yeah, sorry about that. I didn't really think about it, although I should have. That's my bad. For future videos, I'll get a new camera. I promise. Uh, so, anyways, I'm gonna ask you a few questions and stuff. We can have a little bit of a discussion. And yeah, so to start off, we're gonna have a few questions about your Las Vegas Open experience, and then I have some questions regarding your thoughts on the 40k competitive or the state of competitive Warhammer 40k and how everything's going.
sounds pretty straightforward. Let's do it.
Okay. Why did you decide on playing the army list that you did at the Las Vegas Open, and what factors went into your list building thought process?
Okay, perfect. So the core of my list has remained pretty much unchanged for a long time now. I really like Imperial Guard. I really like Infantry Horde Imperial Guard, and everything about my list is really built about maximizing that playstyle as far as I think I can take it. Um, so that's where I started. And then how I refine the list is attempting to think ahead to what kind of threats that I'll be facing, almost army by army, even specific formations and abilities, and make sure that I have a plan for when I encounter them. So I don't just show up at the table and see 25 Ludas hitting on exploding fives, shooting twice, and think, oh, I'm done. I
Yeah.
need to have a plan. And the advantage of my list is even though it's slow relatively, it's reasonably tough, and I've tried to maximize the toughness as much as possible. That way, even if I face an opponent who pretty much outclasses me, or really doesn't give me good options, at least I still have models left by the end of the game if I play correctly.
Mhm.
And as long as I have models, I have plays. So it at least keeps me in the game most of the time. Um, but even specific matchups, like you can look at the top eight, and I was definitely planning for everything that made it to the top eight. Um, Chaos was definitely a strong foe. I expected Thousand Suns to make some plays, especially with Demon Allies.
Mhm.
I expected Yunari. I expected Imperial with Knights mixed in, and I actually faced that 5 times over the course of the tournament.
Yeah, knights were
Imperials with
everywhere. I think
Knights,
they took up what did they say? 25% of the playing field had a
they
knight in
did.
the list. Yep.
And every Knight list had a Castellan, unsurprisingly. Although, to remember, um, there was one list with 3 Crusaders instead of a Castellan, and that list was actually really good. I liked it. So I do think that there were stronger lists than mine at the event. In terms of pure calculated ability, it's
Mhm.
just that my list felt right for my playstyle. Number one. Number two, I admit fully that I'm very slow to change. So people who kept track of the Bay Area Open in 2018 will realize that I brought a Shadow Sword to that event, and House Raven Castellans in their unmodified form existed at the time. And I did actually face someone there who had brought a list specifically tailored to deal with mine. My Shadow Sword did no damage to his Knight Castellan, and he killed my Shadow Sword instantly through debuffs in return. So that was pretty much the last time I've taken a Shadow Sword to an event. But it
Mhm.
took a painful experience for me to do that. So I'm pretty slow to change, as opposed to someone like Alex Harrison. I have to compliment his list design. Most Inari players go down the checklist and say, I've got my 1 to 2 Shining Spear units, I've got my 1 to 3 or 0 to 3 Dark Reaper units, I've got my Cat Lady, I've got my Farseer on a jet bike, and I've got my Warlocks and maybe a couple of Wave Serpents and maybe a 20-man Guardian Blob. with Oathway, and maybe even an Audtark on a jet bike with the Lance Relic. Well, he didn't bring almost any of that. And he did that by calculating first what the meta would be, and second, what would be the best response to that meta, as opposed to my approach, which was, this is the list I want to play. Now, how do I make it fit into the meta? So that approach is probably stronger from a pure calculation standpoint, but I do my approach simply because I think being extremely familiar with your list and how to use it is extremely important, so that you can continue playing to your list strengths at every event, because ultimately the strategy that you play is very similar, even if the opposition is totally different.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's what I like about my Dark Eldar list. I know it inside and out pretty much. And yeah, at this point I wouldn't trade it for anything else, because it's so valuable knowing like so many matchups and having so much experience with your army, because then you've seen so many more situations, you know how to deal with them, instead of like something catching you off guard while you're at an event. So I completely agree with that. I also like how like you said, you, instead of just picking an army that fits the meta, you picked, like, you had your army already preset, but you still like tried to tailor it and figure out, how can I make this fit the meta.
That's right.
Okay.
That's typically my approach. I want to play an army that I like playing. There have been a few occasions where I've done a totally radical shift, either as an experiment or because I think that the list model that I have is completely obsolete. So last year's LVO, I experimented with a Blood Angels, Dark Angels fortification detachment. I went 4-2 with that and learned a lot about the melee phase. Also in 7th edition, the first time I won at Barrier Open, I took a Dark Angels Battle Company. That was the first time I'd ever run a full Dark Angels list, ever, was going to that event. And I did a lot of painting and building prior to that event. But the thing that put me over the edge to running full Dark Angels instead of any guard was I'd been playing guard at that time for a long time and realized that my list would be far better without them. So I started over again from a new concept for that reason. But without those painful experiences, I would have continued playing guard pretty much.
Okay. So next question then is, because we've already established that you do tailor your list for the meta in the event that you're going to. Would your list be different if you were going to an ETC event compared to the ITC scoring events?
It would and it wouldn't. So once again, I'd start from that core of, this is the style of list I want to play. What can I do to make it good? And then almost like planning to prepare for the meta, planning to prepare for the mission is also a step. So you need to make sure, am I going to be able to score the points over the course of the game that I need to? Is the list equipped to do that? Or in the case of ITC, does it give up too many secondaries too easily? So those are things you want to consider while building a list as well.
So with this, did you try to limit the amount of ITC secondaries that your list gave up?
With minor adjustments, yes. With major adjustments, no. So for example, the Castellan easily gives up 4 secondary points in the ITC if you take the Kingslayer objective and your knight is a character. So kind of just resigned myself to giving up some easy secondary points in almost every game. And opponents that could hurt the knight took it and easily got 4 secondaries. Big Game Hunter, I do have 5 Big Game Hunter things in the list. So you can kill my Hellhounds and Wyverns in the night. And again, get 4 secondary points. And then I have 80 infantry. If I took 60, I could have adjusted the list to give up secondaries less easily, in terms of making Reaper less obvious of a pick. But I felt that it was too important to have that many infantry, because most armies can kill, say, 30 guardsmen a turn pretty reliably. Some can kill 40 or 50 or 60 in one turn if you're not careful. And I feel like that extra number of guys goes a really long way, because you typically end the game with a couple guardsmen left, even if it's been a bloodbath. Whereas if I took 60, I'm ending the game with none. So there was a calculation there more about, what am I going to end the final turns of the game with, than giving up secondaries. because again, my focus is have models on the last turn of the game.
So you don't really care if you give up a lot of secondaries as long as you feel that your list is actually really well structured and is going to accomplish what you want it to accomplish.
Yes, but there's a risk to playing that way. If you go over my scores at the LVO, for example, I had a lot of 2 to 4 point wins. I think
Okay.
after my first game, the margin of victory for every other game except game 6, because the bonus objective became super important, was 2 to 4 points. So
Okay.
I do give up secondaries very easily, even if I'm winning the game, which means that my opponent still gets a lot of points. And it also means that I can't just stop paying attention, because if I'm going to give up that many secondary points, my opponent always has a chance to come back.
Yeah, and that means you pretty much have to win on the primaries in order to win that game.
Um, it's true, but it also depends on how many secondaries my opponent's giving up. If my opponent and I are giving up almost the same number of secondaries, yes, I have to win on the primary, but not by very much.
Okay. Well, that actually leads perfectly into our next question then. So, in hindsight, is there anything you would have changed up for your list going into the LVO?
I was very happy with how the list performed. And it's actually been tweaked multiple times before coming to the event. So there is nothing in hindsight that I would have changed about the list unless I did something completely different. But for the list I was going for, the one I took was the right call.
For the next question, what is your thought process when choosing secondaries in the ITC?
Well, you first have to have a reasonable expectation of what units are going to get deleted over the course of the game. So, for example, if you take the marked for death stratagem, or not the stratagem, the secondary, those are the units your opponent is probably going to play a lot more cagey with.
Mm-hmm.
So even just announcing to your opponent what units you're picking is going to say, you might want to not throw that into me.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Like, that was a mistake I made against TJ Lanigan. He took the headhunter stratagem, and I started throwing characters into his army, and he just started picking them up. So I gave him a couple unnecessary points that I really shouldn't have if I'd been paying attention to what secondaries he took. If I'd been on my A game, I would have said, "What are your secondaries?" "Oh, okay. I'm going to keep the characters away from you, and you won't get any points for them."
Yeah. You
Um,
just deny them points.
that's right. But even the way you design your list, let's say you're facing someone who's designed a list where you reasonably can't kill anything that they have,
Mm-hmm.
just nothing. Or they've designed their list in a way that you can only get 2 or 3 secondary points for everything that you'd get in the ITC.
Yep.
You really need to design your list to earn secondary points efficiently against any list. So you need to design lists that can handle recon,
Yep.
that can handle ground control if you need it, that can handle old school, even just get a kill on the first and last turn of the game and have something in their deployment zone. That's 3 points. Because almost all the other secondaries, and I'm looking at this here, they involve killing things.
Yeah. Most of
So
them do, except for those few. Like behind
yeah,
enemy lines in there as well.
because sometimes you're going to face a knight player. Well, in the knight player's case, you can just pick Titan Slayers, but there's a few lists you could face where you just reasonably don't expect to kill anything important for the secondaries over the course of the game. Butcher's Bill is another one that's kind of deceptive. It looks easy on paper, but I look over a lot of my games and I think there were a lot of turns where I only got 1 kill. Or there were a lot of turns where I get 5 kills and then
And
the
you
rest of the
overdid
game I
it,
get
yeah.
1.
That doesn't
So,
stack either. So with your 5 kills, you wouldn't get 2 points. You would only get the
no.
1 point.
So if I kill 8 units turn 1, I'd get 1 point for it.
Yep.
So I feel like if you're taking something like that, you need to have a list that can play cagey enough where you're not just throwing the game by not killing the important units when you need to.
Okay. So when people pick secondaries against your specific units, you purposely play cagey with them. You keep them back. You try not to like put them in harm's way, so that way you can deny those points.
You should be thinking that way.
Well,
And you
obviously,
should
yeah.
also,
Sometimes you might need to use them.
yeah. So, for example, there might be a thing where I could say my Hellhound or this character can go run forward and get an objective and get destroyed. If you picked Headhunter and not Big Game, or you picked Big Game and not Headhunter, that might be the tiebreaker to see who gets picked to get thrown out there.
That makes sense. Well, with the next question then, how do you normally practice for an event like this? What kind of prep do you do, and when do you normally start prepping for an event like this?
So, my life right now doesn't give me a lot of time for 40K. So basically, the time that I budget for playing 40K is only at events at this point. I don't think I played much outside of events last year, except right before LVO. I got to practice against Cooper Waddell, a Southern California native, and I went to the Game Empire Pasadena, which is in the greater Los Angeles area, and got a couple practice games in there. But it was very deliberate practice. This wasn't, let's play a game and have some beer and pretzels. This was, okay, now that we've set up, let's critique how we've set up our armies against each other. Let's critique what units that we have available to deal with the other person's list. Let's critique who wants to go first or second, what happens if you go on the turn you don't want, what does it look like for the first couple turns, how will the rest of the game play out. Okay, let's modify our lists and try again.
So do you
That
play
sort
out
of
the whole
practice.
game in that practice, or do you sometimes like do your deployment and then look and be like, oh well, I messed up over here. Let's redo deployment really quick and see what I can change.
With deliberate practice, it's not about having a fun game. It's about having your opponent and you critique what each other are doing. So even as soon as you set up your list, if both of you agree there's no winning for this person from this situation, or you've just royally screwed up, you admit that and you reset everything up, and try a different approach. Or you go back to the drawing board and say, should I bring different units? So against Cooper, for example, we played out if I went first against him, he had a Swarmlord Genestealer list and he had Venom Thropes. What ended up happening is the Castellan shot the Venom Thropes to death with the Siegebreaker cannons, plus some indirect fire, and then just massacred the Swarmlord turn one from across the table, because the Swarmlord has a 48-inch range with most of its guns. So even though it was hammer and anvil, I was able to put my knight almost on the line. So even though his Swarmlord was all the way in the back, it didn't matter. And because I had more drops than him, the knight would always be deployed so that turn one, if I go first, the knight is going to shoot the Swarmlord. So that was some really good practice, because he discovered, okay, -1 to hit penalties really don't do much for the Swarmlord, even with the Venom Thropes. The Malanthrope is too expensive to fit into his list. So I think he ended up running with Tyrant Guard, because Tyrant Guard, just adding more wounds, was the best call for him. So that is the best kind of practice. But if you can't do that, the next thing that I do is a lot of talking with my teammates, forums. People are always trying to bounce ideas off of each other. So one of my teammates says, I think this Eldar list is really good. What do you guys think? And we all say, well, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. What if you did that? Like right now, even with the Genestealer Cult book coming out, Michael Snyder is super pumped about it, and we're busy discussing a bunch of Genestealer list concepts, and paying very close attention to that at the moment, because even though I'm not playing Genestealer Cult, I expect to run into it. I mean, I ran into
Oh,
Nick
for sure.
Rose at the SoCal Open, and he was solid, and he wasn't even playing a fully optimized list at the time. We both knew that. So with the new Genestealer Cult, anyone who's playing them is someone to watch out for.
Yeah, I think they're. I've went through the Codex. I think they're going to be really good.
So just having a teammate who plays it and we're discussing it, he's getting better at playing them, and I'm getting better at realizing what to expect from good players who play Genestealer Cult. So that can be more valuable than just going to your local RTT and playing someone who plays Genestealer Cult, because as good as that player might be, generally they're not going to be Nick Rose level.
Yeah.
So they're not going to bring out the nastiest surprises that Codex has in store.
So yeah, I think it's a given, but just to say it anyways, just to make it clear for the viewers and stuff. So you think too, you should always be practicing in that way where you go over your mistakes with your opponent, you critique each other, you make sure that you're both uh, making sure that your list can deal with one another, but you're also playing it optimally. But then on top of that, always make sure, or if you can, try to play with the best players that you possibly can, so that you know that you're getting the best practice that you possibly can.
That's a great summary.
So I guess we'll move on to the last question regarding the LVO stuff. And then we got a few questions just regarding the state of competitive 40K.
Okay.
So the last question about the LVO stuff. Do you have any advice for people who may want to copy your list and use it themselves?
It's the same advice that I was giving out earlier. It's make sure that the list fits your playstyle. If it doesn't fit your playstyle, you're not going to have a good time playing it. And there are plenty of other lists you can net list that will suit your playstyle that also did really well at LVO. In fact, I wouldn't count out any list that went 5-1. So people are so focused on the final 8. There's so many good players who went 5-1 at LVO. And if you're not looking over their lists as well, you might be missing out on a list concept that better suits your style. So getting so focused on this list won LVO, well, do you know how to play with it?
Mm-hmm.
That's my only caveat for anyone considering. 8th edition is the most balanced edition of Warhammer 40,000 I've ever seen. So there's so many different viable armies that can go 5-1 at the LVO. I've never seen the game state like this before. So there's probably builds out there that haven't been discovered yet as well. And especially as new material comes out, you may want to even reconsider things that weren't being considered before. So if there was a Grey Knights list that went 5-1, take a look, see what that player was doing.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Maybe there was. I haven't went through all of the lists to be honest, but yeah, it would be interesting to go through all of those 5-1 lists. I'll definitely do that now. So thanks for that advice.
Of course.
But yeah, what you just said a few seconds ago, that actually leads me into the first question for the general questions about the state of competitive Warhammer 40K. How do you feel about 8th edition and its current balance for competitive?
Well, let me put it this way. For anyone who's aware, this isn't my first time being in the final 8 of LVO. I did have a second place finish 2 years ago, and the list that I made second with is absolute fluffy garbage. It was a horde of Fenrisian wolves led by Azrael, and also with a Ministorum priest and some Dark Angels characters. So they all had a 4-up invul and a 5+ Feel No Pain save, and there's 40 of them, combined with the Dark Angels Battle Company. It was the most unfluffy, unfun to play against the list that I could possibly come up with, and it almost won LVO. And the list it was playing against was a Chaos Renegades list with dramatically undercosted artillery spammed and a Sky Shield landing pad for putting his demons on so they would have a 4+ invul rerolling 1s because they're Zinch, and Screamer Stars. I do not miss Screamer Stars. So compared to what 40K has been, it's fluffier than it's ever been, especially with the battalion and brigade formations. They're like, here, take troops. Troops are good.
Yes.
The rules for ruins, take infantry. Infantry are good. You
Yeah, it
really
really
didn't
felt like
see
they were
that
doing
much.
that. They really pushed, like you said, like with brigades and battalions and with all the stuff that infantry get. Like just they're the only ones that get toe in cover saves and stuff like that. They really boosted the effectiveness of infantry and made them appealing to take, so armies actually look like armies now.
That's right. Otherwise, it's just back to the meta of that event in 7th edition where the top 2 players were running 5 Wraith Knights because they weren't in an ITC event and they could take 5 of them, and they were running strict rules as written, and the best meta game at the time was 5 Wraith Knights.
That's pretty funny.
It's just like, well, where are the rest of the Eldar? Oh, they stayed home.
They stayed home.
So
It's just the Wraith Knights today.
So right now, I feel like the attention that Games Workshop is giving the game in terms of rules, the cooperation they're giving with some of the people, even I know, who are helping to play test the rules, the game is as balanced as it's ever been. Sure, they've made some mistakes, but they're tending to shy away from what I think killed 7th edition at the end, which was you hand out so many abilities that improve your unit, and you allow them to all be put into one unit, especially with the characters joining units rules. And at that point, it's easy to construct a Death Star by simply taking a unit that's already good and throwing as many buffs as you can possibly cram into it to make it unkillable. So thankfully, we have not reached that level yet in 8th edition. The smite mechanic also helps tone that down, because if you ever created a super Death Star, Thousand Suns player is going to just do 10 mortal wounds to that unit every turn that you can't do anything about. For those reasons, I really like it. Much better than previous editions.
Okay, I would have to agree with you too. I think 8th is it's not perfect by any means, but it's still like very balanced, at least when you consider it or compare it to previous editions.
It's true, and more importantly, Games Workshop is admitting when they've pushed something too far or left something by the wayside. Like the chapter approved 2018 review that I did for Frontline, everyone said all your reviews were that the units were perfectly balanced once they were adjusted. And I'm like, well, almost. I mean, I think there are still units that, because of the way they're designed, can never be appropriately costed, because they're just going to be bad 90% of the time and amazing 10% of the time.
I agree with that too.
So the Hydra is one of those, for example, for Imperial Guard. But other than that, the chapter approved 2018 was so balanced for Guard, I was shocked. So they didn't make the things that were good better. They just made the things that you weren't seeing on tables good enough that you should probably consider taking them. Like even Valkyries had like a 30 or 40 point drop. Because no one was
stuff. They dropped points everywhere.
Exactly, and I think I heard rumors that someone was taking the formation from Vigilus with their Scions and Valkyries and actually using it, and it was working. So that's what I want to see, where every army in the game doesn't have the one build that's viable. It has, you can do different things with this army that are all fun, and some of them are really good, so you're going to see them a lot. And the stuff you're not seeing, Games Workshop's going to pay attention and make it more valuable in the future.
Yeah, I like how they're doing that too. It's like the Valkyrie thing too. I saw one of my top 10 lists. I actually covered a list that was using the Valkyries, or the guys dropping out of the Valkyries with the new formation. But speaking of formations, that actually leads into the next question. With the introduction to specialist detachments and the fact that you used one in your list at the LVO, do you think they're going to start dictating the meta as much as formations did in 7th edition?
Definitely not. The formations in 7th edition, like Battle Company, were, to borrow a gaming term, over-centralizing. So the formations became the only way to bring that army. So if I was going to bring Dark Angels, the only way that I'd bring them is in a Battle Company, because if I wasn't, I was wasting my time. I don't think the Vigilus formations are going to do that. I think that they're nice for encouraging playstyles that aren't really as prevalent. So, for example, I really like the Dark Angels formation for the Ravenwing, because Ravenwing bikes really weren't seeing play. And Talon Masters and Samuel had so much potential, but they were lacking that extra little spice to them. And again, because they're focused on, you have to bring troops if you want to unlock enough command points so that you can play with your Vigilus abilities, I don't think it can spiral anywhere near as out of control as 7th edition did, where you could just take no troops if you felt like it. Almost.
Yeah, some lists can get away with it.
Exactly. So, even the artillery formation that I took, it's a nice to have, but if I just spend all of this CP all the time, turn 1, I'm going to spend 10 CP, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
So you still have to be selective about what abilities to use. The formations cost a command point to take, which is not trivial. Every command point counts, as anyone who watched the finals game at LVO knows. Right now, they seem reasonable, and I like that they seem reasonable, because they allow you to do fun things, but they don't break the game at the moment. We'll see if that continues. I hope they maintain a cautious approach because, again, 7th got out of control when you could throw too many buffs on too few units to make them Death Stars. If the formations start bringing enough abilities that you can make true Death Stars again, I feel like that'll make for some very unfun, unfluffy play.
I agree with that. That Games Workshop's been pretty good about it so far, though. Like, I feel like there is a little bit of like Codex creep and stuff like that, but I don't think it's like horribly off the charts.
It isn't, and part of the reason for that was I feel like a couple of the codexes in the beginning were not that great. The guard book was one of them ones that was amazing. And I feel like if you compare the guard book then to the Genestealer Cult book now, oh, okay, they're pretty close. So the guard book has been toned down significantly since the openings of 8th, and reasonably so because it was way ahead of the other codexes. But now we're seeing some other codexes come out that are comparable to early 8th edition guard, in my opinion. So it's starting to make more sense. The problem is that Games Workshop pretty much is releasing a codex that they know they're going to have to release rules questions for almost immediately. But even that said, the codexes that are coming out allow you to do so many cool things. Like even the Dark Eldar Codex, as much as I hate the Rax and Talos and Homunculus formation where you have 4-up invuls, I think that's an unbalanced trait because you never see any other trait. The fact that you can have Sean Naden taking a witch cult in the finals of LVO, and you can have someone who's taking Grotesques and Talos in another list, and you can have Eldar and Yanari in the same list. All of these different books are all bringing good things to the table. I think that's a good thing. Honestly, they're getting better and better at making the different codexes level over time. But doing something like that out of the box is incredibly difficult, and thankfully they're paying attention to the competitive scene now, and they are making adjustments where necessary, I feel. So far, there are still some changes that people are rightfully noticing that are due, I think, that are probably going to be rolled out. At least that's the expectation, because Games Workshop's been so good about it in the past. Yep. The only question is how, without making the game unfun for the players who've invested in those models or armies. So that remains to be seen.
They could do is like nerf something so bad, but tons of people, like, I kind of felt bad for, like, for example, people that went out, like when Hive Tyrants were being spammed or Commanders were being spammed, and people went out and bought a ton of those, and then Games Workshop was just like, nope, you only get 3 now.
That's right.
Yeah, so it kind of hurt. Like, I have 5 Hellbrutes myself. I'll only ever get to use 3 now.
So that is a concern, but I do think that despite the rule of... It was still good
for the game, though.
That's right. That's just it.
Yeah.
Because you can still spam troops. Like, I can take 8 infantry squads, but it's not correct if I can take 8 Layman Russ tanks, but I still can.
You can.
They just have to be in 3 choices.
Yeah.
That's actually a thing that they've kept in mind. I think a lot of the units that you can take in squadrons are not quote-unquote over-centralizing, simply because they tend to be pretty middle of the road and balanced anyway. So if you're spamming them, they have obvious weaknesses.
Yeah. You just go up and bad touch all the tanks and they can't do anything.
That's right. I think you'd have problems with Death Stars if you could still squadron certain units. So for example, if you could take 3 Layman Russ in 1 unit, the Overwatch as Mordian with defensive gunners would be stupid.
Yes.
Especially if you've buffed the unit, so if you put a psychic barrier on them or -1 to be hit, you'd start approaching Death Star levels again. But now we're talking about Imperial Knights, because Imperial Knights are a 600-point model, which is pretty comparable to 3 well-equipped Layman Russ that you're putting a single relic or Warlord trait or psychic power or whatever on. It's approaching Death Star levels is kind of the problem.
So speaking of knights that are 600 points, the next question is, do you think that the Castellan or Soup armies need any sort of balance changes at all? And if so, how would you want Games Workshop to go about it?
So I understand where Games Workshop's coming from. Soup quote unquote soup
Yeah, I don't like the
is
term either. I hate the
it.
word soup.
I think it's actually good for the game when done correctly. So, for example, what they're doing with Tyranids is amazing. So, I'm a guard player, and Michael Snyder, my friend, is a Tyranid player.
Mhm.
But now he has guard, and I could, if I wanted, get Tyranids and use Genestealer Cult to bridge the two. So it makes it very easy for us to say, you know, I'd like to try a new army, but I can slowly work in models from that other army into my
Yes,
existing lists. And if I don't like them, I don't have to keep playing them. If I do like them, I can just start collecting them as a whole army. So
I agree with
for
that.
me, I like that approach. I think it makes it harder to balance the game because units across codexes actually have to be compatible with each other. You can't come up with anything too ridiculous. But so far, they've been making it so that psychic buffs, aura effects only work on codex specific things. Guilliman is an example of
Except
an
for
exception.
Eldar with Doom.
Yeah, that's where they have to be more careful because debuffs can stack with other factions because they're on the enemy army, not your
Yep.
own. So that is something they'll have to be careful about going forward. But if all of the abilities only stack in your own faction and the different codexes are actually balanced, I think it's fine. And it leads to people coming up with some very creative list combinations. Like, I really like the idea of the final 8 list from Justin that had Admech, an Imperial Knight, and some Guard. Just because, first of all, you can theme that really well. Like, Mechanicus and Knights already is like peanut butter and jelly in the fluff. So I don't want to get rid of soup that people are doing badly to punish also the people who are doing soup because it allows them to try out new armies or new strategies or just a formation in their list and have
Yep.
a lot of fun with that. So I'd like to keep soup in the game for that reason to help players who want to try new things and be creative.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Castellan, mathematically, we're coming back into Death Star territory. So, for example, theoretically, let's say that I had a 2,000 point model
Yep.
and cast +1 to saving throws on it. Well, now my entire army has +1 to saving throws, which is insane when you think about it, especially if I was going from a 3-up to a 2-up save, because moving from a 3 to a 2-up save actually doubles your toughness. Because a 3-up save, you save all but 1/3, and a 2-up, you save all but 1/6. So these very slight changes, when applied to huge point cost units, can have huge effects. Just like, let's look at the Luda Ball, right? The Luda Ball is effective because you're putting 25 Ludas in one unit. That's very expensive. And then you're using expensive CP abilities to improve their firepower, but they start stacking on each other because you're using Grot Shields to keep them alive. If you didn't have Grot Shields, taking a 25-man unit of Ludas might actually be a bad idea. Combined with the 5s are always a hit and you reroll 5s as additional shots, combined with reroll 1s to hit, combined with shoot a unit twice. All of that on its own would have been okay. Like mobbing up Ludas into one unit, totally fine. Grot Shields on a unit of 10 or 15 Ludas, totally fine. Shooting twice with a unit of 15 Ludas, no problem. Exploding on 5s with one unit, sure. But because you can put all of that into one very points intensive unit, it starts becoming game breaking. It's borderline Death Star if you're not careful. So the Knight Castellan is suffering from that right now. The Knight Castellan's a 600 point model that has a 3 CP ability that improves its firepower on the weapons that roll a d6 for damage, d6 to hit, d6 to wound, and d6 or d3 for number of wounds by something like 40%. So if you're getting 40% more shooting into your list for 3 command points on a 600 point model, that's almost 240 points of extra shooting for 3 command points into your list. So I'm playing with 2250 points and you're still playing with 2000. Combined with the number of buffs you can give it to make it tough. So Knights with a 5-up invul, 2/3 of things that ignore their armor go through. A knight with a 3-up invul, 1/3 go through. So for a command point plus 3 command points to rotate ion shields, my knight is literally twice as tough for a turn than it would have been normally. Of course, I have to keep spending command points if I want to keep it that level of toughness, but for one turn, I just added 600 points of toughness to that model. That's how you can think of it, against weapons that would have ignored its armor save, of course. So anytime you're going to put a really good invulnerable save on a very expensive model, you're asking for trouble because you're heading towards Death Star range. The question is, once the Castellan is gone, what does the meta look like? It'd be nice if I could bring Layman Rust tanks, honestly, or a Shadow Sword again. Like, if I could reliably kill an Imperial Knight or cripple an Imperial Knight with a Shadow Sword, I'd bring it again, because Guard really suffers with the range shooting against Imperial Knights, except with the Shadow Sword. The problem is that Knights in their current form are like, I have a 4-up invulnerable save, and I have a command point reroll, and if I have a Guard ally, I have the Grand Strategist reroll, or even the Imperial Knight Warlord trait reroll. So you pretty much bounce with the first volley, and then all the Knights shoot the Shadow Sword and it dies. That's pretty much the expected result right now. So it's kind of sad when you want to bring a tool that is specifically geared to kill things with a Titanic keyword. Necrons are in the same boat with their Pylon, and it really does not perform as advertised. But we'll see. I'd love it if I could take a pure Guard list and feel confident that it's ultra competitive. I'm sure most people who play one Codex would love to feel the same way. But
a lot of people do.
If the Castellan ends up being significantly reduced in power, probably through the use of toning the command point abilities, in my opinion, I think the points cost is fine. And Games Workshop has been doing a great job at balancing the points. It's the command point abilities, stratagems, and relics that are really taking it over the edge.
So how would you change it then? What would you change about the relics and stratagems for the Castellan?
It's difficult to say because triple knight armies or full Imperial Knight armies still need the relics and warlord traits, in my opinion, to be competitive.
Yeah, so it would be hurting those if it's like an indirect nerf to them. Well, still technically a direct nerf, but they're trying to hurt the Castellan if they nerf it, but those things will affect those other things.
That's right. And the players that I saw who were bringing triple knight plus some allies to gain more command points, and again, infantry is key. The knights can't walk into ruins, so having some infantry in a knight list is totally reasonable, and people who are knocking it for being a soup need to understand that knights are pretty limited in what they can do, and it might actually be essential to their design that they can have allies. So I really don't want to make primary knight players really sad. So that would be my advice for Games Workshop, is make the Castellan reasonable as an ally, but don't tone it down so much that the other Imperial Knights are also toned down horribly. Because Imperial Knights are fine. It's the Castellan Auxiliary Detachment that's a problem right now. And again, even if you overcommit on the Castellan, if you don't fix the underlying problems with Knights, I'm designing lists already that have an auxiliary Crusader in my list instead of the Castellan. And the Crusader's still an excellent fire support option instead of the Castellan. So if you want to fundamentally change the take an auxiliary knight meta, there might be more there. I don't know. But so far, Games Workshop is proving that they're coming up with points changes and rules changes more wisely than I am. I think it's partially because they're listening to multiple people and getting lots of suggestions and doing lots of play testing, which is far more than I have time to do. So I defer to their judgment, because so far I think that they've been making a lot of good calls more often than not.
I would agree with you. The Games Workshop has been doing a really good job at addressing a lot of the problems that have been popping up throughout 8th edition. Like, we had the beginning of 8th edition, and no one was taking infantry, or at least not a lot of people were taking infantry. There was stuff like Gilliman with a bunch of flyers, so they made the boots on the ground rule. They also made battalions more command points. They also made brigades more command points. Um, just stuff like that overall. Every time there seems to be like a big elephant in the room, Games Workshop has been addressing it. The only time that they haven't done it, but I'm sure they will do it, is with the last. Or actually, no, they did address it with the last big FAQ. They did address the Castellan. It just
They
wasn't
did.
enough, apparently.
They made command points far more rare for Imperial players, which I think was a great change, honestly. And they also toned down some of the Blood Angel Captain shenanigans,
Yeah.
and they toned down the rotate ion shields. And basically, they made it so that, yes, you can make a Castellan a superhero, but you can't make it that the whole game.
That was pretty dumb.
So now you actually have to be careful and selective with the command point abilities as opposed to just spending them like candy because you never run out.
But yeah, I also agree with you. I'm confident they'll find the right answer, or maybe not like the perfect right answer, but I'm sure they know better than we do. That's essentially what it comes down to, or at least I think they do. They have way more people working on it, a lot of people testing stuff out, and I have faith in their balance team that they'll make 8th edition as good as it possibly can be.
Correct. And again, the intention is not to make the Castellan unplayable.
Oh, definitely not.
So you should still see it, and you should still have to prepare for it. But it shouldn't feel over centralizing when 25% of the Imperial players were taking it, or whatever that stat was. It was a high number.
It was a very high number.
It might also be that there are combinations coming, for example, from Genestealer Cult, where they can spend 250 points and kill a knight in one turn, that could invalidate the Castellan already.
Yep.
Which is, again, why I'm erring on the side of caution with don't go overboard. Don't make the game unfun for knight players. Well, just get it to a place where it's fun for everyone.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I have a video talking about it's called Perfect Imbalance. And the idea is that sometimes when you have thing like a Castellan, which is a little overtuned, sometimes it doesn't matter because there's things that people can bring that just crush it, and they make it like it almost makes it feel like it's not overtuned. Like people,
That's right.
Yeah. So like it's like, oh, that thing's great at killing a bunch of vehicles. Well, I'm gonna bring nothing but cheap infantry now. And or like you even said with the Genestealer Cult, they're gonna have ways to deal with it, pretty easy and efficient ways for the most part. So once all this stuff comes in, it's like a game of cat and mouse. It's like, well, the Castellan's doing good, so now a bunch of stuff's gonna come out that makes the Castellan not that relevant. And then once that happens, now new stuff has to come out to make that other stuff not that relevant, and it just goes on and on and on. And the key thing that I think is, and that you already mentioned this earlier, is you got to predict what these changes are going to be. And if you're the one that predicts them and jumps on them first, well, you're going to be the one that surprises everybody and ends up taking that W.
That's right. So take it from me, I'm also looking at what else can I do besides the Castellan, starting with some of the Vigilist formations. But there, I think, are going to be some new options or really solid options that people are overlooking to throw into a guard list that could be really strong. So I'm keeping my mind open on that front.
Any chance you want to let us know those secrets?
Not yet.
I figured not. A magician never reveals his secrets.
Not until I'm on the table.
Yeah, fair enough. So the final question, I guess, to close out this interview. Do you have any advice for new players who want to get into competitive Warhammer 40k?
Yeah, of course I do. So first of all, I'm very happy that you're considering competitive 40k. If you're a casual player, don't be too intimidated. Number one, know that there's a lot of depth to the game that you're probably not aware of if you're a new player, and it can be really fun to learn about the game and do the hobbying aspect and the strategic aspect and the modeling aspect and all of that stuff. But if you're just getting started, keep an open mind about things. Be willing to admit that something's not working. Try to find players who are just as good as you and maybe a little better. Try to keep finding players that you can lose against. So that's my advice. If you're new, find people who are your level and keep improving. and then try and find people who are even better and lose against them and have them explain what they did. Or if you can't do that, at least analyze it yourself with your friends to try and figure out, I never even thought of doing this. What can I do to be more like this person or to get better at the game? And that's really the formula. Lose often, because if you do what I did, which is win a big tournament, did I learn a lot? Yes. Would I have learned more if I'd faced someone who just toasted me? Yeah, I would have, because I would have said, wow, I'm surprised by how well this listed. I need to come up with new ideas for how to deal with this. But clearly, what I was doing was working, and it makes it harder for me to improve now because I don't have that negative feedback that tells you, you know, what you were doing wasn't working. Maybe you want to try something.
I think that's great advice for new players. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get over the pain of losing, it can serve you in this hobby really well when you stay calm after the end of the game that you've lost, and maybe it's been super painful or super close, and just analyze it critically and say, what did I do? What could I have done better? And discuss it with your opponent, because you can never have all of the ideas yourself. And getting someone else's perspective, even if it's wrong, at least you're aware of that perspective.
Yeah, I guess thanks for the interview. I appreciate you coming on the channel. If there's anything else that you'd like to say, or any maybe shout outs to anything, feel free to do so.
That's a nice thought, but I haven't thought that far ahead. The only thing I'll say is thank you for having me on. Again, fan of the show. Hope you continue making some cool videos, especially the ones that explain some rather complex concepts in a way that is very approachable. I really liked that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you like the videos. Honestly, it makes me really happy knowing that you actually like the videos.
Oh, good.
And yeah, so good luck to you in the future too. And again, thanks for coming on the channel. And to everyone that's watching, thanks for watching. Check me out on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.